Me too. I'm just setting up right quick. Okay, give me 1 second and then we're gonna start. Give me 1 second. All right, so for members who are in the chat already, can you send me a message? Let me know if you can hear me, if you can see clearly. And then we're going to send out a message and then we'll get started. Okay, and if you, in order to ask questions, you have to log into Ustream. If you don't have an account, you can sign up for an account real quick, but you have to log in order to send a message through the chat. But just somebody send me, oh, you can hear me? All right. All right, I'm gonna send out one message real quick and then we're gonna get going. In the meantime, you can check out, if you have some questions ready, you can post them in the chat now if you want to. Okay. All right. Okay, so mi chiamo mediante Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan. And Kwesi Da. That means my name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan. Today is Kwesi Da Sunday. We're dealing with Akhan Nana Som, ancient authentic Akhan ancestral religion. What we're doing with this broadcast is a little bit different. We just wanted to have a question and answer session because a lot of people had some questions that they wanted specifically related to Akhan Nana Som, the various publications we have dealing with ancient authentic Akhan ancestral religion. People had questions about different publications that we have, so we just wanted to open up the chat for questions. We've had different events in a number of different cities since the beginning of our New Year, our Obra Jira, which is our New Year celebration in Akwamu Mine and the Akwamu Nation in North America. Our New Year begins on the first full day of the Atem equinox, or the autumn equinox, the first full day of fall. To this year, that's September 22nd, so that was our year of 13,014. That was the beginning of our year. And since the beginning, even a week before that, leading up to that, we've been to a number of different cities. We were in Philadelphia in September, but also back October 12th, we were in Philadelphia. October 18th, we were in Houston. October 26th, we were in Delaware. November 9th, we were back in Texas. We were in Dallas. November 16th, we were in Virginia. November 24th, we were in Knoxville, Tennessee. December 7th, we were back in Philly. December 14th, we were in Hartford, Connecticut. And then just yesterday, December 21st, we were in Washington, D.C., and we had a good session in Washington, D.C. So our schedule, the next events coming up, we will be posting on the website. So we just want to, and all these different events, we very often would have 2 or 3 hour question and answer sessions in addition to the regular presentation. The most recent event in Connecticut, we had about a 4-hour question and answer session the day before the event, and then the day of the event we did the presentation for a couple of hours, and then after that we had a couple of hours of question and answer. So there's a lot of information that people want to share, people want to know about. So just you can start typing your questions in now, dealing specifically any topic dealing with Akhan Nana Som. You can type them in the chat now. We have a number of people, I see it, are in the chat room or viewing. So you can just type in the questions now. The next event more than likely will be in the first or second weekend in December. It's possibly going to be back in DC again, so we're going to be sending out information dealing with that. And we possibly may be in Atlanta in the latter part of January. So we will be updating you with that. The questions are going to be focused around Akhan Nana Som. If you look at the page, the introductory page, we talk about Akhan people coming directly from ancient Khanit or Khanat, which is a title of Nubia, one of the many titles of ancient Nubia, Sudan. It's called Khanat, the Akhan, Khanit land. Khan in ancient Kemet means to first, foremost, from the beginning, the south land, the front land, and so forth. And the people of the Khanat or Khanit land were called Khanitu or Khanatu, meaning the people of the first land, from the beginnings, from the south, and so forth. Khan means first, foremost, beginning, and so forth. It also means to count or to reckon, to calculate. In the Akhan language of Ghana and Ivory Coast, there are about 11 million Akhan people in Ghana, about 9 million in Ivory Coast. They make up about 49% of the people in Ghana, about 45% or about 42% or something like that, around that approximately in Ivory Coast. About 20 million Akhan people in West Africa, today one of the largest ethnic groups. In the language, the term, of course, Khan means first or foremost, but Khan also means to count or to reckon. So when people say, why do people name themselves Akhan? Where did that ethnic name come from? In the language, the Akhan people of today will say Khan, the root Khan means first or foremost, meaning we were a component part of the first people created in the world. Khan means first or foremost, but also Khan meaning to count or to reckon, to calculate. We were a component part of the first people to engage in calculations, reckonings, learning how to measure and use those measurements to establish civilization. So calculation, mathematics and so forth, the foundation of making decisions based on the movements of the stars, the phases of the sun, the lunar phases, the earth changes, and establishing our civilization based on those calculations. So that was the foundation of civilization. So we were the first to come into being, Khan, and the first to calculate or reckon, Khan. That in the Akhan language today, it means the same thing in ancient Khanit or the Akhanat land, Nubia. Khan means first or foremost. It also means to count, to calculate, to reckon. So we show how linguistically the same group of people called the Khanit people migrated west, reestablished Akhana civilization, the ancient empire of Akhana or Ghana. After the invasions of the Muslim invasions, some of us moved further south from the ancient empire, the region of the ancient empire of Ghana and later Mali and Songhai. We saw that there was deterioration in that neighborhood, and some of us decided to move south. We reestablished ourselves in the forest belt and reestablished Akhana civilization or Akhan civilization. Some of our people were taken from the forest belt and brought to South Central and North America and the Caribbean and Europe during the enslavement, Musuo Kwesi, the great perversity, the enslavement period, and that's how some of us ended up here. So we can show the direct migratory pattern from ancient Khanit, the Khanit land, Khanat, Nubia, to West Afuraka, the forest belt, and to the Western Hemisphere. We can also show genetically that the people of ancient Kemet and Khanit have the same haplogroup, the Y chromosomal haplogroup you'll find in, for example, Ramesu III. They found that E1B1A, that haplogroup, is found in the greatest frequency in West Afuraka at about 80%, and about 50 to 75% of black people in America carry the same Y chromosomal haplogroup. Is a direct descent from ancient Khanit, ancient Kemet, to West Afuraka, West Africa, to Afurakaini people here today. So you can see the linguistic connection, you can see the genetic connection, and then of course the ritual connection. We worship the same divinities, the same abosom, the same deities operating through the sun, moon, stars, earth mother, oceans, rivers, atmosphere, fire, mountains, all the forces in nature. We still worship the same ones we worship in ancient Kemet by the same name, so you can find these same divinities. In Akhan culture, the various abosom, the forces in nature, are the same divinities from ancient Kemet by the same names, same ritual colors, same functions in creation, operating through the same aspects of the physical universe. So on every level, we can show that we're the same people. So this is why we talk about ancient, authentic Akhan ancestral religion. So it looks like we have the first question. It says, when communicating with the Nananum and Samanfo during shrine work, does time of day influence? Very often we communicate with the Nananum and Samanfo during Anajo, which is the nighttime. That's not the only time that we communicate with them. The most important thing is whatever pact that you make with the Nananum and Samanfo, then you keep that pact. If they want to communicate, and they communicate all the time, but very often during Anajo, during the cool part of Ada means day, Ajo means cool, so Adajo, the cool part, Jo of the day, is nighttime. So that's why in our Khan culture, the term Adajo means nighttime. When the sun sets, just like when you show in ancient Kemet, the sun, the Aten setting in the west, and then the sun goes into the quote-unquote underworld for the 12 hours of the night, and that's in the world of the ancestresses and ancestors, the spirit realm, and people who are called Westerners or Amintiu are the people who live in the West, meaning where the sun sets, that's symbolically saying the person's life sets. They're a living sun, and they set in the West just like the sun sets in the West. So often we would have our Nkomre ancestral shrine on the western wall of the home, or south or southwestern, because that's where the sun sets, and that's the valley of the Nsamanfo, that's the gateway to the ancestral realm. So at nighttime, the energy is often more prominent, but you don't have to do it only at night. It depends on the pact that you make with your Nananum and Samanfo, and that determines that's the key. So very often it's at nighttime, but you can also do it early in the morning and even during the day if you need questions answered, or depending on your schedule, you can establish that time as long as you set aside a specific time, a specific space, and then you approach them in a specific manner according to, the way you develop that relationship with them. Okay. Okay, and now the next question, or did that answer the question? Just send me a response. Let me know if that answered the question. The sister asked the question, how do I create a shrine? Okay, so this is what we typically recommend first. Now we do have a couple of articles talking about the establishment of an Nkomre, an ancestral shrine. First, let me give you the definition of the term. There are many different terms for an ancestral shrine. The term that we utilize in Akwamu Amaruka Etifimu, meaning the Akwamu nation in North America, is Nkomre. Nkom means spiritual communication. Bere in the tree language in Akhan means a time, it also means a place, and it also means manner. So nkom bere or nkomere means it's a specific time that you engage in nkom, spiritual communication. A specific place, bere, that you engage in nkom, spiritual communication, and in a specific manner, bere, that you engage in nkom, spiritual communication. So the nsamai kombre is the ancestral nsamai nkombre. You can also have abosom nkombre, meaning deity, abosom nkombre, shrine. So it's a spiritual communication place in a time in a specific manner. That's why we use the term nkombre. In fact, that's the term we coined in the Akwamu Mine Amadokai Tifimu in the Akwamu Nation in North America. We coined that specific term to designate the ancestral shrine, the abosom shrine. So what we typically recommend people do, first listen to the Kukutuntum, the ancestral jurisdiction, at least once. You do not have to memorize it, but you want to listen to that at least once because it deals with the cosmological foundation of creation. Amen, Amenet, Ka, Kaet, Ra, Raet, the creator, creatress, the supreme being, which is the great mother, Amenet, the great father, Amen, and Akhan called Inyamewa, the great mother, Inyame, the great father, supreme being, who function together as one unit, the supreme being. We talk about the cosmological foundation of creation, how they give birth to the various abosom, Ra and Raet, or Nyonkumpon and Yonkunton are the creator and creatress. They are the creative power. They are servants of and subordinate to Inyamewa, Amenet, and Amen. So Amen and Amenet are the great mother and great father. They are the supreme being, but they give birth to Ra and Raet, who go out and create the universe. Just like you are a being, you're a female, a being, a male is a being, that's like Amen and Amenet, and Afurakani male, Afuraikani female, but you have procreative power, life force energy that within you, that circulates within you, that you can direct to your legs, direct to your arms, direct your energy to different parts of your body to activate and give yourself energy. You can also direct it through your reproductive organs to procreate a child. You as the great being, Amen or Amenet, can direct your life force energy, your Ra and Raet, to go out and create. So you are the great being, you direct your creative force to engage in a process that you direct. Amen and Amenet, the supreme being, direct, they give birth to and direct the creator and creatress. So there's a difference between the creator, the creatress, and the supreme being. So we go into detail about that. We talk about the cosmological foundation of creation. We talk about the nature and function of the supreme being, the nature and function of the creator and creatress, the nature and function of the abosom, which is the Akhan term for deities, spirit forces, divine spirit forces in nature that animate the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, the oceans, the rivers, the mountains, the earth mother, and so forth. They are called Orisha in the Yoruba tradition. They are called Vodou in the Fon and Ewe cultures. They are called Arusi in the Igbo tradition. But we're talking about the same thing. All the groups on the continent in Afuraka, Afuraikai in Africa have terms for these forces in nature, but we're all talking about the same forces in nature. Although our languages are slightly different, yet related, but the culture fundamentally is the same across the board. So we go into detail about that. We talk about the nature and function of the divinities, the abosom, Ntoru, Ntorutu, or Netoru, Netutu, but more properly Ntoru, Ntorutu. That's the term, the major term used in Kemet for the deities. But they also use the term Mesu or Mosu, which means divine offspring, and that's where in Akhan, Bosu or Bosum, Abosom comes from. So we talk about that. We talk about the nature and function of the ancestresses and ancestors of Afuraka, Afuraikai, the Nananon Nsamanfo, the honorable or spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, as well as the ancestresses and ancestors that may have not may not have been spiritually cultivated, but they were good people, so we call them the Nsamanfo Pa, meaning good. So you have the Nsamanfo Pa, the good Nsamanfo, the good ancestresses and ancestors. But then you also have the Nananom Nsamanfo, meaning the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. It is that class of ancestresses and ancestors that help us and have the responsibility given to them by the Supreme Being to assist us in our development, in our spiritual development, because they are the ones, that small group percentage that mastered life while they were here on earth. They learned how to live in harmony with divine order in every thought, intention, and action without profaning themselves or the community in the process. So because they lived in harmony with Inyame wa Inyame and Sheshe, or divine order, they achieved the societal office of Nana, which means the great elder, elderess. It's a gender neutral term, but it talks about somebody who's achieved that level of spiritual growth. They've been crystallized in that spiritual cultivation. So now they have the capacity and the responsibility to assist those who are related to them, and when they become Nananon Nsamanfo, those who are their descendants, they have the capacity and the responsibility, and they're the only ones with the capacity and the responsibility to assist us in our development. So we talk about the nature and function of the ancestral spirits, the ancestral realm. Then we also talk about the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, and Talmud. So we go into detail about Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Aaron, Jesus, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, David, Jesus, Yeshua ben Pandera, Muhammad, Brahman, Buddha, Yahweh, Allah. All of these characters are absolutely fictional. They never existed of any race whatsoever. It's pure foolishness. There's no such thing as esoteric Christianity, esoteric Islam, esoteric Judaism. All of that is foolishness. Hermeticism, Taoism, Buddhism, Kabbalism, Vedanta, pseudo-Native American spirituality. The pseudo-Native Americans are just white Asians who migrated from Asia, invaded the Western Hemisphere because we were already here previously. So we go into detail about all of that. We recommend that people listen to the Kuku Tumtum. It's a free download from the website first, so you get fully grounded in the cosmology of Afuraikai, Africa, and your direct blood descendant from your ancestresses and ancestors, and that cosmology that's written in you, and you purge the false conditionings of the false pseudo-religions and pseudo-religious practices, and pseudo-New Age spirituality, all of that foolishness. We also talk about the nature of the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring. All of the whites and their offspring incarnate as spirits of disorder. They're not some good whites and their offspring, some bad. They all are spiritually disordered. They are all divinely hated by the Supreme Being. Hated by the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Arusi, the Ntorotu. Hated by the ancestresses and ancestors, Nsamanfo, Nananom Nsamanfo, Egungun, and so forth. They are the cancerous cells in the body of black humanity, and the only response to cancerous cells is their extermination and their expulsion. So we go into detail about that. So once people have that full understanding about the cosmology and their place in the world, the nature of their soul, their spirit, their kra, their ba, or abra, then you can move on to the Uben Shang, which is a text. You can download it again from the website for free. We talk about the nature and function of our ritual practices, shrines, ancestral shrines, libation, ancestral and deity possession, ancestral and deity communication, idols, all these various different things, talismans, amulets, nature worship, a number of different practices that we engage in, and we show that when we engage in these practices, we are receiving, processing, and transmitting energy in a measurable fashion. We don't engage in any ritual practice that is symbolic. If it's symbolic without substance, then we don't engage in that. We don't engage in foolish, empty ritual. that is what the whites and their offspring, whether they're white Asians, white Europeans, white Hispanics, white pseudo-Native Americans, they engage in empty ritual because they have no connection to the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, the forces in nature, or the ancestresses and ancestors of Afurar Ka, Afurai Kai. They don't have a Kra, they don't have a soul, they don't have a divine consciousness, so they engage in pseudo-ritual that's an imitation and corruption, a fragmentary corruption of our ancient traditional practices. It's impotent and foolish. They engage in that. We engage in real ritual. So we have people read that, and then read the Wabojida, which are principles of purification, fundamental principles, 7 fundamental principles of purification that are written within our Kra, Nemoja, our soul and blood. And once we reclaim that, then we can move forward with a requisite level of purification or cleanliness, spiritual purification, where we can go forward and then establish an Nkomre. So we have the article Nkomre, Ancestral Shrine Communication. You can download that article. Nsamai Nkomre, Ancestral Shrines in Kemet. We also have Nsamai Nkom and the 7 senses. And then the article Odwirafo and Akwamumai. And all of them talk about ancestral communication. In the first article, we talk about we talk about the nature and function of a shrine, and how to establish a basic shrine using 4 basic elements: candle for fire, a bowl of water, a stone from the Earth Mother, just you going out into the forest or outside and getting a stone, asking them Samafo to direct you, Nana Asase Afo to direct you and pick the stone that you're drawn to. You bring that. Of course, you have a cup to pour libation. Incense, we often use frankincense, myrrh, and then we talk about having a representation of the divine balance of male and female. We recommend that because we need to constantly be reminded of the divine balance of male and female. There's Amen or Amen Ra, there's Amenet Ra'et. There's Ka and Ka'et. There is Ra, the creator, Ra'et, the creatress. They are the Abosom, the Ntoru, so-called Neteru, but also Neter-tu, which are the goddesses, Neteru or Ntoru, which are the gods. The goddesses and gods, the ancestresses, and the ancestors. So it's not just the creator, God, and the ancestors. There's the great supreme being, the great mother and father. There's the creator and the creatress. There are the goddesses and the gods, the ancestresses, and the ancestors. If we use English words sometimes to describe what we're engaged in, we need to be clear, and we need to constantly remind ourselves and whoever we are conveying this information to that there are ancestresses and ancestors. If we say ancestors, we should say ancestresses as well. If we say gods, we say goddesses as well. If we say creator, we must say the creatress as well. We can't leave out half of creation. So we go into detail about that, but we show that we should at least have a representation. This is what we do. This is our own convention, but a representation of the balance of male and female. It could be a sculpture. It could simply be printing out an image of Asar and Aset and placing it on the shrine, or Ra and Ra'et, or Amen and Amenet, or even drawing a picture of them. Or even if you didn't have that, you could go out and get 2 stones out from Asase Afur, the Earth Mother, that carry that energy you're drawn to, and those 2 stones would represent the balance of male and female. But we have those various elements, and then we move forward. So that is in the article Nkomre, Ancestral Shrine Communication. You can find it on the Akhanfo Nanasom page, as well as a number of different pages on the website, but definitely that page. Let me put the link for that page up right now. Okay, so all of those articles, you can find the links there, as well as the Akradeen Bosom page. So let me know. Hold on one second. Let me know if that answers your question. Okay, yeah, you said you had a number of questions. So yeah, just type them into the chat, and then we'll get the questions in order. Okay. So next question is, Brother asks, why is it difficult for the Nananum Nsamafo to reach us and sometimes causes mental breakdowns? Okay, so there's a difference. Hold on one second. There's a difference between some people who are having a mental, what they would call a mental breakdown, mental disturbance. Again, there are some people who have a physiological issue, like a traumatic brain injury, they call it TBI, that can cause problems with processing information. So that's one thing, but excluding people who actually have some neurological disorder. There are some people who develop a quote-unquote behavioral illness, and it's actually a behavioral illness because they may have gone through trauma. Their spirit, for one reason or another, is disaligned from their Kra. So your Kra, again, is your consciousness, your divine consciousness. It's a divinity. It's an aboson. It is a orisha, a force in nature that is assigned to you pre-incarnation. So, as we said in the previous webcast or broadcast, when the spirit of the person, before you come into the world, and you're a spirit in the ancestral realm, you're one of the ancestral spirits, just like one of your ancestral spirits now is in the ancestral realm, and they're about to reincarnate. Like the most recent addition to your family, in anybody's family, a newborn child, that's an ancestor or an ancestress who has returned. But before the conception, they were in the ancestral realm typically, and when the male and the female copulated, that spirit was drawn into the womb of the female. But before that happened, they were an ancestor or an ancestress in Asamando in the ancestral realm. What happens with Afurakaini people is, before we are drawn into the womb, we are drawn from Asamando, the ancestral realm. In our Akhan culture, Asaman Da is the place or the region Da of the Asaman or Asamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors. So it's Asamando, the ancestral realm. We're drawn from Asamando, the ancestral realm, up to Inyamewa, Inyame, Amenet, Amen. We are assigned a Kra, a soul, a divine consciousness, meaning it's a deity. There's a specific divinity, a deity, that Inyamewa, Inyame assigns to us and directs that divinity to dwell with us. And that divinity comes to dwell with us. It attaches itself to our spirit. In the head region, when we're born into the world, we can feel that divinity in the head region. That's always pulling us in the right direction towards harmony with divine order, whether we align with that force or not. That divinity is assigned to us. And then now we're a spirit, a sunsum, that's been infused with a divinity, a consciousness, a soul, a Kra. So that's the difference between the soul in a real tradition and what the whites and their offspring just say, oh, somebody has a soul. Well, a deceased person is a soul, the soul of the person. They just call that the person's spirit or soul. That's a totally different thing, an inaccurate thing. You're a spirit, a sunsum, but you have a soul. Just like you have a body, but then you have a smaller body within your body, which is the brain that regulates and directs the functions of the body. You have a spirit body, a sunsum, but then you have a spiritual brain, which is your Kra, an entity that dwells within the spirit's body, and it directs the function of the spirit. So as you're going through life, you can feel the pull of that spiritual force in the head region. That's that deity, that messenger of the Supreme Being that represents the Supreme Being that dwells within your spirit, that directs you at all times. Spirituality is about aligning with that force. What happens with some people, first, after we're infused with that, then and encoded within that Kra, which we call in Akhan, Ka and Kemet is the soul, the female is Kayet. It's called Ori, Inu, or the inner Ori, the inner head in Yoruba tradition, and the Selido in Vodun. Once the spirit of the person, the Sunsum, is infused with the Kra, now you're a spirit with a soul. Now you're a whole entity. And within the Kra, within the soul, within that divinity, Inyame wa Inyame encodes within it the function you are to execute in the world, the manner in which you are to execute that function, the force of energy or compulsion to execute that function in a harmonious fashion. So you're given a blueprint of what your function is to be in the world. Just like every cell in the body has a specific function, every organ in the body has its own function executing the body, its own blueprint, its own plan of action. You, as an Afurakani spirit, an African spirit, you're given a soul, and within the soul, encoded within that, is your blueprint, your specific function you are to execute within creation. And creation is the great divine body of the Supreme Being. The organs within the great divine body are the deities, the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, and so forth. And the cells of those organs are us, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani Afurai Kaitni, or African human life. And Afurakani Afurai Kaitni, or African human life only. None of the other so-called human beings are the same as us because they do not have a Kra, an Okrawa, a soul, a Ka'et. So they are spirits of disorder, spirits without that divine consciousness, spirits that don't have an anchor in divine consciousness, so they have no connection to the forces in nature, the Supreme Being, and so forth. So you're encoded with a function, and how to execute that function. You have a specific configuration of spiritual energy that you have been given so that you can execute the function. You're not just given a function and you can't execute it. Maybe your function encoded within you is to be a healer, like in the immune system. Maybe you're just like you have cells of the immune system, their function is to destroy cancerous cells and maintain the integrity of the body. Maybe you're an immune system cell within the great divine body. Maybe that's your function. So when you come into the world, you're going to be naturally inclined to engage in the healing process. And when you see dis-ease within our people, and our people alone, then you'll be naturally inclined to restore order, restore balance, to remove the dis-ease. You have that natural inclination coming from your crowd because that's what's encoded in your crowd before you even come into the world. That was encoded within your crowd by the Supreme Being. Some people are naturally inclined towards building. They're like skeletal cells or bone marrow cells within the great divine body. They're naturally inclined towards an engineering function. Other people are naturally inclined towards a protective function, like the lymphatic system and so forth. So they're naturally inclined to, remove obstacles and maintain order in the great divine body. So you have a function, you have a specific configuration of spiritual energy to execute that function. If you have the function to be a healer, you'll be assigned to divinities that give you the energy so that you can execute the healing function. Maybe you need to heal through the fiery medium, so you'll be assigned to fiery Abosom, fiery Orisha, fiery Vodou, and so forth. You may be healing through the watery medium or a cool medium, so you'll be assigned to a water divinity. And you will carry that watery energy, and you'll manifest that watery or cool temperament when you come into the world. And that'll be a natural inclination because that is what has been encoded within your Kra, and it affects your spirit. And that's defines who you are, coming directly from the Supreme Being. So some people come into the world, so you understand that structure. We come into the world, things happen, we get conditioned by this society, we're taught certain things, we may have traumatic events that disalign us from our Kra, whether we're taught foolishness and we're conditioned and we reject who we are, just like people, straightening out their hair, bleaching their skin, making their hair blonde, worshiping a white Jesus or any kind of Jesus because Jesus didn't exist at all. All these things are impositions upon our spirit. It's basically burying our, disaligning us from our Kra. So we engage in these misguided behaviors. Our Kra is leading us in one direction, we're going in the other direction. So there's a disalignment, there's a discordance, and there's some imbalance. And that happens with the majority of us. But some of us are very receptive. We're spiritually receptive. So we're receptive to the ancestresses and ancestors, but then we're also receptive to discarnate spirits, people who die, discarnate sunsum or spirits, people who died, maybe somebody in the family who was murdered, or in the family who died in the house, and then you move in the house and you can feel the spirit of the person in the house. Or some people are a little more receptive or clairvoyant, they can see the person walking around in the house, especially when they're children. They're more receptive, they can see these things, they can feel them, and so forth. But you see these things, you're clairvoyant, you can see or you can hear, you can feel the spirits. And then society tells you there's something wrong with that, there's a stigma associated with it. They tell you that you're mentally ill and these different things, so you begin to suppress that actual connection, that capacity that you have. But you're still receptive. So what happens is sometimes people, as they grow up, develop, become men and women living in society, still have these capacities to attune to these spirits, attune to or see different spirits, different things happening. They can see, clairvoyantly, they can see spirits in the house or something move by. They can feel the spirit move by them or move around them. They can hear, they're more clairaudient. They can hear the spirits, they can hear these asunsum. Some of these spirits are just earthbound spirits just hanging out, harassing people who died violently. They weren't ready to move on to the ancestral realm. They're still trying to hold on to their family members here. They died violently, they got shot, their blood was spilled in the street. Their spirit is still hanging around the spot where they were murdered in the street. And anybody who comes in that area, if the person is a little receptive, they can hear what this spirit is saying. Anybody else is just not paying attention. So they're trying to harass everybody, just like a homeless person can harass everybody who walks by them. Most people just don't pay attention. Every now and then somebody will stop and pay attention. If you have a deceased spirit, a discarnate spirit who's earthbound, they didn't move on to the ancestral realm, they're harassing everybody who walks by that corner that they've been hanging out at for years where they got shot. But 99.999% of the people who walk by do not listen, don't pay attention, and if they feel something or hear something, they assume it's their own thoughts and they just keep walking on. But then you have some people who are receptive, they're spiritually open, and they can hear the spirit speaking. But when they hear the spirit speaking and saying certain things and conveying to them their anxiety and projecting their anxiety and projecting their tension and projecting their just disdain for what happened, all that negative energy, the receptive person walking by can pick up on all of that. Sometimes they can see them, sometimes they can't see them, sometimes they can just hear them or feel them. And when that spirit recognizes that, oh, you can see me, you can hear me, then they attach themselves to the individual. And now they're trying to communicate with the individual all the time. They're just like a very depressed person venting to the only person who can hear them. And it's no different than when somebody is here in the world. A depressed person, they may vent to certain individuals who give them an ear to listen because everybody else is not paying attention to them and just rejects them. But the one person who listens, they let it all out and they call them all the time and so forth. When they make their transition, they're the same way. They will vent, communicate, lay it all out to the only person who's walking by and actually stops and says, oh, I can hear you, I see you're an actual spirit, everybody's walking by you, but I can hear you. And when they see that you're the one that's receptive, they jump on you, and sometimes other spirits as well. They see that nobody else walking down the street is paying attention, or nobody else in the house is paying attention, and they can't see them, but you can see them or you can hear them. And once they detect that, then they swamp the person who can hear them. And we're not used to that. We're not used to a bunch of spirits communicating with us all at one time. Then at the same time, we're distressed and we create stress within our bodies because we're taught that we're not supposed to be hearing anything. And if you hear something, then you're supposed to be crazy, there's something wrong with you. Then you get stressed about the fact that you think that you might be crazy. You don't want to tell anybody because you think they're going to say that you're crazy and try to medicate you or lock you up. But then you're still hearing the voices, so you just want the voices to stop. So you become stressed, you become traumatized. When we have stress, then we secrete hormones unnaturally and out of cycle, which creates more stress, it creates more illness, creates disease. It can lead to, of course, a high blood pressure and headaches and everything. And then you get to the point where you don't want to have anything to do with all of that, so you would rather focus on anything outside of what's actually going on. You want your focus somewhere else. So you take your focus totally away. You just don't focus on the reality of what you're going through because the reality of what you're going through is too painful. So you would rather focus on something else. And when you start focusing on something else, you neglect what's happening in the here and now there's a disconnection or a discordance. And what's happening is people see you operating in the world as though your mind is in a totally different place, and it is. because you don't want to be focused on what's happening in the world because it's too painful, it's too traumatic, and the possible repercussions of, what people may do if they find out what's going on with you is also painful. So the potential that other people find out what's going on is even more painful than what's actually going on. So you do take your mind and your spirit and your focus, and you focus on something totally different. Just like somebody daydreaming, people are trying to, get their attention, their mind is somewhere else. But you go into that mode of quote-unquote daydreaming, and it lasts for hours, days, weeks. It just varies. And now people say, okay, the person's ill. It's no different than if you went into a region where there were a whole bunch of people who were drug addicts, and they're all in this particular street or in certain abandoned buildings. You can have some other people out on the outside saying, hey, you need to come away from that area, it's a bad area. But if you're hanging out in the area, you're only listening to the people who are in your immediate proximity, and you allow yourself to be influenced by them, the other people may not have as much influence until you direct your focus to them. It's the same thing with the Nananom and Samanfo. They're always ready to communicate with us. But if you have people in your immediate presence that you're more focused on, and you go along with them, then you're going along with wayward, discarnate spirits. Just like somebody can go hang out with the wrong kind of people instead of listening to what their parents tell them. They hang out with the wrong kind of people anyway. They end up getting in trouble. We listen to the wrong kind of spirits that have connected themselves or attached themselves to us. And then the Nananom and Samanfo, we still hear them, but their voices are more faint because in the immediate present circumstances, we're not paying attention. We're more latched on to the ones in front of us. So what we need to do is reestablish, first, the same process, going through the Kuku Tumtum, Uben Sheng, Wabojida, and then dealing with the ancestresses and ancestors. But we need to refocus ourselves on the fact that, one, we have a Kra, we have a divinity, a divine consciousness that's encoded, that's infused within us, and that is the central force that we should be aligned with. Just having knowledge of that, which most of us have never been told or informed about, just reclaiming that reality and seeking to realign with that in and of itself begins to repel these negative entities. Then when you reestablish communication with your ancestresses and ancestors, through ancestral communication, establishing a shrine, they began to help to repel these negative entities as well. And then when you engage in ritual practice with your Nananom and Samanfo, it's no different than working out. The more you work out, the stronger you become, the more you're able to repel, bacteria and things like that. You strengthen your immune system. It's no longer compromised. When you engage in ritual practice, you strengthen and make your spirit, we say the Sum Sum become, Sum Sum Yeduru, or the Sum Sum is heavy, it has substance, it has weight, it has power, and your Sum Sum is no longer as light and able to be pulled around in different directions. You're able to repel negative entities and just focus on your ancestresses and ancestors. Your Nananom and Samanfo, and focus on your Kra. So let me know if that answers your question. So a lot of these, the majority of these so-called mental breakdowns or whatever, very often the people are just very receptive, and this is when we're talking about when it has to do with ancestral spirits or discarnate Asunsum, or spirits that are not related to the person but who may just be in the area that the person moves through, whether it's going to work or going wherever. People are receptive to them, and then they influence them. Now there's also people who have suffered from traumatic experiences, rape, torture or molestation and different things like that, and they internalize that pain, internalize the trauma, and it's hard for them to focus outward. But again, it's pain, it's trauma. They keep reliving that or rehashing that. They've never been taught how to move beyond it. So when you have a great deal of pain that you've internalized, you don't want to focus on the pain, so you'd rather focus on something totally different. The pain is too much, so you just want to direct your focus away. So when people do that, then they're considered, mentally ill, and then they're given medication, which just all it does is just destroy or really pervert their physiological system, their brain cells, their neurons, the firing of the neurons and everything else. It makes the whites and their offspring a lot of money, and it causes us a number of new problems, but it doesn't solve anything. So when people have a great deal of pain, they don't know how to address the pain, they don't know how to overcome it, they believe that they have to internalize it, have to keep focusing on it, they don't know how to, move beyond that, then they don't want to, they feel like they have to focus on it, it's still there, it's a part of them, but they don't want to focus on it. So they focus on anything else to the point where they get into that state where they'd rather just quote unquote daydream, focus on anything else than that constant reminder of that pain. And then they're considered having a behavioral illness. But we've always had these things in the community, and we have ways to address it through the ancestral religion. This is where ancestral communication comes in, as well as dealing with, nanano mpanyinfo, which are honorable elders and eldresses in the community. But since we don't have, most of our people are engaged in Christianity, Islam, foolishness like that, people don't know about the culture and how to address these issues. So we in America have to focus more so on our ancestresses and ancestors on the nanano mansumanfo. Normally in a normal situation, we would have people in front of us in the family, extended family, who have mastered life, who know how to navigate through these issues, and they could show us that process. And then we would also get information from the nanano mansumanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors. In our condition, most of our older people in the community who would normally be in that position to assist, they've been compromised by Christianity, Islam, and the other pseudo-religions in this Western perverse, dissexual, homosexual culture. So they're not in a position to be able to assist. So we have to spend more time dealing with the nanano mansumanfo, getting information directly from them, which is not a bad thing because you get the information pure, uncut, and authentic, and you can incorporate it into your life. All right. Okay. You said, now one question. Okay, give me 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so you had a question, why don't they have an Akhan? Okay, so if you look in the Akhan complex, the Soul of Akhanfo book, we talk about race and the Akhan. So we go into that in a little bit, and we also go into it in the Kuku Tumtum, the ancestral jurisdiction. So as we were saying with regard to incarnation and reincarnation, when you have a spirit in the ancestral realm, or discarnate spirit in our community, you have an Afurakani person, male, Afurakani female spirit, they're about to return through the womb of one of their descendants. Before that happens, they're drawn up to Inyame wa Inyame. They are infused with an Akra, a divinity, a force in nature. It's infused within their spirit in the head region. Their specific function there to execute is encoded within that Kra, within that divinity, and then they're sent back into the ancestral realm, and then eventually they're drawn into a womb and born back into the world. When the whites and their offspring die, their spirit leaves their body. They're in a lower level of the spirit realm. They are not allowed in the ancestral realm of Asamindo, where the Afurakani, Afuraikaitni ancestresses and ancestors are. Just like you have two magnets on a table with the same polarities facing, if you put one of the magnets near the other one, it will repel the other one without touching. The Afurakani, Afuraikaitni ancestresses and ancestors are spirits that live in harmony with order, just like the Abosom, the forces in nature, are spirits of order. They embody divine order. They repel disorder. The whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder. So we repel them naturally. As long as you're in harmony with order, you repel disorder or any spirit of disorder. The reason they are spirits of disorder is because they do not have an okra, or okrawa, aka, okaet, or ori inu, or selido. So they are repelled. They are spirits without an okra. They can't get into asamando, the ancestral realm. They're either earthbound or in a lower level of the spirit realm, and that's where they dwell. And then when one of their descendants copulates, then they're drawn back into the world through one of their descendants and come back into the world. So they go from living in the world, die a lower level of the spirit realm or earthbound, and then right back into the world through one of their descendants. When we make our transition, our spirit leaves the body. We are in the ancestral realm, unless we get caught up in some trauma, like we said before, and now we're earthbound and hanging out the spot where we got killed and things like that. But most of us, we go to Asamando, the ancestral realm. When it's time for us to reincarnate, we are first drawn up to Inyame wa Inyame, given that Kra, that divine function, assigned Abosom that support that function, whether it's a fiery Abosom or watery Abosom or Abosom of the atmosphere, whatever it is that's assigned to us to give us that energy so that we can carry out our function. Those assignments are made, assigned to our spirit. We are infused with that energy, and then we're sent back into the ancestral realm to await reincarnation, and then we're drawn into the womb. The whites and the offspring never get to that point. They never get to Asamando, the ancestral realm, and they never get to Inyame wa Inyame because they are repelled by Inyame wa Inyame. The reason they are so is because before the whites and the offspring existed, of course, there were only Afurakani, Afurakaiti people, African people, black people on the planet. And that was the case for millions of years. Now, just like you have 1 out of every 100,000 cells on average within your body becomes cancerous at any given time, that means the cell, instead of functioning normally and supporting the organ or organ systems of which it is a part, it begins to go in a different direction. So it becomes cancerous. It moves outside of its function, and it begins to engage and malfunction and cause problems for the body. And then it begins to proliferate. So you have a development of a number of disfigured cancerous cells that, instead of supporting the functions of the body, they're going against the body, and they're seeking to consume and destroy the other cells in the body. And if their development goes unarrested, then they will spread and take over the whole body and kill the organism and themselves at the same time. That, just like that happens physically within your system. However, you have an immune system that isolates the cancerous cells, destroys them, and expels them from the body consistently. That's why, although everybody has about 1 out of every 100,000 cells in their body being cancerous at any given time, everybody is not developing cancer because your immune system is constantly isolating, destroying, and expelling those cancerous cells. In the same fashion, the body of Afurakani, Afurakaiti, or black humanity, there was always a group of cancerous cells developing, but in our community, our immune system would isolate, destroy, and expel those cells. So if somebody engaged in murder, somebody engaged in child molestation, somebody engaged in dissexuality, homosexuality, somebody engaged in some insane practice, they're isolated, they're exterminated, they're killed and expelled from the larger body, and the organism continues to move. So we've always had that process. There were some who escaped being exterminated and went further away up into northern Afuraka, and eventually up into northern Eurasia. But they escaped that sentence of being isolated, executed, exterminated, and expelled. Most because they were engaging in disorder. In our communities today, if somebody engages in that kind of disorder, we typically, if somebody engages in child molestation or dissexuality, typically in our community for not only thousands of years, but even in America up until recently, they would be killed, they would be attacked, they would be taken out in some fashion. It's only recently that we've pulled back from some of that because we've been following the perverse culture of the whites and their offspring, because they desire for those kinds of perverse crimes to proliferate throughout the community because they want us to implode and they want us to suffer. But we've typically always addressed those kinds of individuals. in that fashion: extermination, expulsion. So there were some who got expelled, or escaped the extermination and got outside of the community. Now, most people who escape from the community and they're out in the wilderness, remember, this is black people, the only people on earth, thousands of years ago. We've been here for millions of years. Thousands of years ago, we're living in Afuraka, a small percentage, less than 1/100% of people separated, isolated, expelled from the community, escaped that kind of, retribution from the community, from the perverse acts that they were engaging in. When you get isolated like that and the entire community is here and you're out in the wilderness, at some point you realize that what you were engaging in caused you a problem. Most people, they didn't try to reform themselves or, make amends with the community if they could, if it wasn't the kind of crime that, there was just no making amends. They would die out in the wilderness, isolated from the larger community, but their children or grandchildren and so forth, they would recognize that it was not a good position to be isolated out away from the larger community. They would try to return and reintegrate themselves into the community, and most of them would. But you have a small percentage who never wanted to return to order. They engaged in disorder. They were a cancerous cell, and they were either going to continue to be a cancerous cell or just self-destruct. Those were the ones who were drawn up into northern Eurasia. When you engage in disorder behavior deliberately and consistently, you repel your cry. Any black person can repel their cry by engaging in disorder behavior. If you engage in rape and murder, you repel your cry. Your cry is a deity. It's an abosom, it's an orisha, it's a vodou, meaning it's an embodiment of divine order. It's an organ or organelle within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. It does not dwell in disorder. So if you engage in disorder, you're repulsive to your cry and you're repelled by your cry. Your cry is not just going to dwell in your spirit in the head region while you're engaging in, for example, dissexuality or homosexuality. That's insane. That's perverse. So your cry is not going to allow itself to engage in that because it's connected to your spirit. It will disengage. And the Akhan will say, Nekra Duyane. His cry has fled from him. And if something is not done ritually to draw the cry back so it can reattach to the spirit, then the cry will eventually return to Inyame wa Inyame and become dissolved back into the great divine consciousness, just like a drop of water going back to the ocean and being returned to the, dissolved within the ocean. It will never return. When people engage in perverse activity, you repel your cry. If you engage in theft and murder and things like that, even just theft and just foolish behavior, you disalign yourself from your cry. If it's something like theft or some other kind of foolishness and you're disaligned, you can realign with your cry and draw it back to you so you can reestablish balance within yourself. But if you're engaged in dissexuality and other things and it's deliberate and you're consistent and you're focused and you're going to continue engaging in that disorder, then your cry will leave and it will not return. And there are only three things that can happen when that happens. Either the person will die because their cry has gone and returned to Inyame wa Inyame. They will manifest extreme behavioral illness that's not repairable, that you can't, it's irreparable. That's different from somebody who's just neglecting their cry because they're traumatized and they manifest what appears to be behavioral illness. They can just realign with their cry and that pseudo behavioral illness will leave. But somebody who's actually repelled their cry and it's gone, and they no longer have an anchor in divine order, they no longer have an anchor which makes them spiritually aligned or balanced, then they manifest extreme and permanent behavioral illness, real schizophrenia, real bipolar schizoaffective disorder, not pseudo but real. And they will manifest like that until they die. They will manifest Odaim, spiritual illness, behavioral illness, madness, and Akhan is called Odaim, and that will be their condition until they die. That's the second possibility. The third possibility is when the Kra totally detaches and returns to Inyame wa Inyame, never to return. The person will manifest extreme antisocial, as they call, disorders, a vulgar disregard for divine order, for anything harmonious, and they will manifest that kind of behavior. They're just a cancer cell, a criminal entity, and they will remain that way until they are exterminated, until they just die on their own, until they self-destruct. This is what happened with the whites and their offspring. Those black people who engaged in disorder, and they were deliberate and consistent, and all they wanted to do was engage in disorder like a cancerous cell. They escaped the extermination, went further up into northern Eurasia. And of course their Kra disengaged from them, returned to Inyame wa Inyame. Now they're spirits without an cross, like a body without a brain, and now they're running amok. They're spirits of disorder. And when they reincarnate, they don't get drawn to Inyame wa Inyame. They return, just like we talked about. They die, go to a lower level of the spirit realm, return through their descendants, and they come right back. They're still spirits without a Kra. So they're spirits without an anchor in divine order. They engaged, one of the major reasons they engaged that, became that way, is because they were engaged in dissexuality, homosexuality, that perverse activity. When you take the life force energy that creates the universe, and it's your procreative power and it's used to create a human being, and you pervert the procreative power of Ra and Ra'et and try to use that sexual procreative power for perverse purposes, then you're going against the entire creation. So people engaged in dissexuality, homosexuality, we call it dissexuality, it's a more proper and defining term, engaged in child molestation, incest. Those people repelled their Kra. We're not talking about people who were traumatized against their will when they were younger. We're talking about people who engaged this process because of their own perversity, and they're deliberate about it and they want to continue. They repelled their Kra forever. Now they're spirits of disorder. So they were drawn up into northern Eurasia. They continued engaging in spiritual perversity, sexual perversity, incest. Incest creates a higher incidence, an extreme incidence of albinism, a heightened manifestation of albinism. So you have two people giving birth to, brown people giving birth to children with white skin, blonde hair, light eyes. Various genetic mutations manifest as a result of that, including autoimmune disorders. A major autoimmune disorder is vitiligo, where your melanin begins to be stripped from your body. So a number of different mutations, including that, rickets and everything else. But this is how they manifested. Once the Kra left, of course, the melanin began to leave as well. So it's because of their disorder that they repelled their own Kra. That was the spiritual manifestation of the whites and their offspring. And then physically engaging in incest and sexual perversity led to an increase in albinism. Of course, they were in northern Eurasia by that time, caught up in the ice age. That caused even more problems as far as morphology, the shape, characteristics, morphological characteristics, the shapes of their nose and lips and their bodies, because they were in the snow, didn't have the proper nourishment and all that. That's just an extra effect. But the key difference is they repelled their Kra, they became spiritually disfigured, and that manifested as a physiological, permanent disfigurement. So melanin recessiveness, the shapes of their noses, lips, their bone structure, their hair, that's all perverse. That's a manifestation physically of the spiritual degeneration that they brought upon themselves for engaging deliberately in spiritually perverse acts. So that's why they don't have a Kra. Okay. Okay, so let me see. You had okay, so the next question was, in ritual communication, please explain the hierarchy of communicating with the Egungun and the Ori Inu. Which events and times should you? Okay, so there's a difference. So the brothers using the terminology in the Yoruba tradition. Yoruba people of southwestern Nigeria, about 30 million Yoruba there, and there were many, many, many Yoruba people. One of the largest groups that were, enslaved were Yoruba-speaking people. And the Yoruba, Ebe, Fon, Mina, Akhan, Bakongo, Mindi-speaking people. It was those major groups that most of us were taken from and enslaved. So that's why you'll find people naturally drawn to the Akhan culture, the Yoruba culture, Vodun, Bakongo, Mindi-speaking cultures, Mali, Bambara, and Dogon, and various other groups. Those are the major groups that we were extracted from when we were enslaved in the Western Hemisphere. So he's using the Yoruba terminology. Egungun is the term for Nananom and Samafo and Akhan, and spiritually cultivated ancestresses.